and welcome to London Property. I'm your host Farnaz Fazaipo, and today we're here for a different reason than managing property wealth, which is to welcome the founder and CEO of a very important charity run by Gilly Norton called Supporting Wounded Veterans. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to hand it over to Gilly first, actually, to tell us about how this whole thing began.
I started 13 years ago watching men and women come back from Afghanistan severely injured. And my husband had MS very badly. So I could see how your life shrinks when you are very ill. And your challenge becomes, how do I get out of bed? And before you were scaling mountains or running huge things. And I thought originally that we would just take them skiing, actually, out of hospital. And we take them skiing because I know that anyone can ski, whatever your injury. But from there, we then were asked by them to help get them employment. And when we were doing that, we found out that many veterans had become they were taking too much pain medication. And they were addicted to pain medication, which means that you're not living on planet Earth. And we wanted to put them into work, and you just can't put people into work like that. So we got some money from the government, and we opened up pain clinics and addiction clinics. And then we started a huge mentoring program. I think we're mentoring 99 veterans at the moment. And then we started doing research into better treatments at King's for PTSD and trauma. And that's how we started.
That's how you started 13 years ago. So tell us the mission statement of the charity. What would you say that is?
To rehabilitate and to help veterans find their own path with help from us back into life again. Because you can become extremely isolated if you're injured. And if you have hidden wounds, I think it's very difficult to do very simple things, to what appears simple to other people, like take the tube, take a train, go into a supermarket. But until you can do those things, you can't do anything. You can't go to your children's assembly, you can't take a job, you can't do anything. So how do you get people to feel comfortable again, surrounded by a lot of other people? How do you reduce that sense of heightened risk and always being on guard and being isolated? So, we have lots of programs to help with that. And I think we've built this, we're 13 years old now, so we've helped an enormous amount of veterans. And last year we gave, I think, 3,582 hours of support. We gave 900 hours of pain support and advice. It's a lot to do, but the government's not going to do it. They'd like the National Health to do it. National Health, as we all know, is far too overwhelmed to really just concentrate on veterans. So it's been left to the NGOs to pick up. And so far, I think most of them have done a brilliant job.
So it's quite specialised, isn't it? Coming back from even if the NHS was to try and help in the mental health department, it's quite specialised, isn't it?
This
is not something that just kind of applies to all the other people who are struggling.
No. I think trauma from war is a very specific thing. I think it's difficult to talk about. One of the veterans, the day before yesterday, told me that he'd been sent to an NHS therapist, and the therapist had said, "This is too much for me to hear."
Wow.
But it's also, I think, if you have physical injuries, which are enormously complex, if you step on a mine, the shrapnel and the force of the blast goes right through your body. So you might just see somebody, for example, who's an amputee, but there will be so many other injuries. And the year before last, we had a veteran who just had his 100th operation on his stump, on his leg. That's just one injury for one person. Oh. That person's got a lot of other injuries that they have to cope with. So how do you put people like that into retraining or back into employment? And so we designed this sort of holistic approach to try, and we've got a fantastic success rate. 90% of people who go through our programs will go on to get on with their lives, which is what we want. So, but there's always a lot more to do and more money to raise, and it's a long, long journey for most people.
And how does the program? I mean, is there a sort of a unique pattern, or is it very individual when people come to you? So how does the program sort of start and progress?
Well, it is very individually tailored to people because everybody is different. But we normally start either through people going through our pain clinics or people coming out skiing with us and getting to know us and then getting on. It's a funny thing, if I tell people from the forces that I can get them a job, I won't get much traction. But if I say, no matter your injury, would you like to throw yourself down a mountain? They're all up for it.
That's so brilliant. Because you do actually see when you're skiing, sometimes people who are being assisted, and you kind of sense that they're getting that freedom.
Yeah.
They can just slide down the mountain and get all that air.
Yeah.
It must have an impact.
A huge impact.
Yeah.
And I think also skiing in particular is the one sport that you can do no matter your injury. So whether you're blind, whether you've got no legs, whether you've only got half of your, whether your sight, or whether you've got mental injuries, there is nothing that you can't do skiing. And it's the one sport that you can then do on an even playing field with your family. Every other injured sport you can't really do with other people, but skiing is something you can go on and do.
That's wonderful. And do you always go to the same places?
Yes, we do, because it was the resort that first started adaptive skiing. So the resort is there, everybody's trained how to get wheelchairs on and off lifts, and, it's a lot to do. So yes, and we take out hundreds of young people we have now who come out to raise money for us and help veterans and go on to stay involved with the charity with their companies and things like that. So it was very important to me that I felt that a lot of charities, you'll run a marathon for a charity and then you'll move on to the next charity. You'll never meet any of the beneficiaries that you're helping. So I wanted to do a different model. I wanted something where you could meet the beneficiaries, but also something that you would stay with. So that's why we designed the buddy system. And that's been a really, really successful program. There are hundreds of young people now who view disability in a much more positive way.
That's wonderful to hear. And the people who do get involved with the charity, then they travel with you and then they assist and then they come back.
Quite.
Again.
They come back. Well, no, they're never allowed back. We don't take people back because we've got so many people who apply.
Right.
But having made good friends, having made good friends with the veterans, having made friends with the other buddies, they form a very tight-knit group that seems to last for a long time. And we do lots of events with them throughout the year. So, we've got buddies who came out with us in the first year who are still very involved with us. And that's the system that I wanted to have, that you can watch a charity grow, you can learn about philanthropy yourself, and you can assist somehow in that growing.
Do you have a gap year program?
No, but we're about to start one.
Good. I've got one coming up. Okay, and so take us through sort of the lifespan of somebody who starts with the program, stays with the program, and kind of comes out the other end. What does that look like?
A long time.
A long time.
For most people, it's a long journey. It's a huge amount of support. But you do get there in the end. So I think you either come skiing or you come through the pain program, or you might have just phoned up and said, I need a mentor. I've got lost, or I can't get out of bed, or whatever it is. So you might just want a mentor, and then you might do many cross programs. So you might be somebody who's got a great issue with pain, and a lot of NHS pain programs don't allow you to go on them if you've got PTSD.
Okay.
Because you can be viewed as disruptive or too difficult. But a lot of people who've been blown up or who have other pain injuries have PTSD. So we allow that. And then you'll get a mentor who will be not somebody you know, but just like the stranger on the train, who's going to help motivate you, who's going to help you sort out perhaps your compensation claims, or how do you get a mortgage, or you've fallen into debt, you've got addiction, and they will help you sort all of that out. And then you'll go on to our occupation training employment program. You might have a job. A lot of veterans who have got injuries have been incredibly qualified in the armed forces, and then they come back, and post-injury it's very difficult to get a job. And so you might end up stacking shelves at Waitrose, and you've been a squadron leader and you are incredibly qualified. So we try and break that cycle. We try and get you back where you should have been, and get you something that's more rewarding. And we've just started a rivers program, getting veterans out to work on the rivers, not as volunteered, as paid people, monitoring and helping to get the rivers back to health, as another program to find suitable workplaces for people who've been through a great deal of trauma.
And how do they become aware of your charity? So are the armed forces supporting you in any way?
No, they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to do anything. Once you've left the armed forces, you've left. Most of the people who come to us come by word of mouth. Other veterans who tell them, or they hear about us, I think, through, I think the trials that we're doing at King's has, attracted a lot of people to the charities. So whether or not they get on the trial, they still need other methods of support from us. So, I'm always surprised how many people seem to have found of us. We don't do any advertising, we don't do any PR, we don't do anything like that, but people seem to find their way to us.
And talking about the stuff that you're doing with the Kings, can you tell us a bit more about that? So what are you involved with? What have you learned that we can learn from you?
Well, we did the first trial in England using MDMA, ecstasy, with therapy. So it's an ecstasy-led therapy program, a trial at King's, for which we had to raise £2 million. And that's been, I'm very glad to say, very successful, much more so than conventional treatments. For some reason that nobody understands, really, veterans perform significantly differently to the civilian population with cognitive behavioural therapy, EMDR, rapid eye movement. They just don't do well on those treatments. So, most of the veterans that we see will have had 10 years of failed mental health treatment.
Because it's not strong enough.
It's not that it's not strong enough, it just doesn't work on that sort of trauma.
Right.
And yet there was nothing else. And then I learned of this trial going on in the States, and now we're just about to do another trial, I hope, with Cambridge University and Addenbrooke Hospital for the second trial, which will be looking at individual treatment as opposed to group treatment. Veterans tend to work very well in groups. So could we make that treatment more available to a great more people? And we're tying up with a whole load of other countries to do that trial and share data and see what comes. So we've got to raise another 2 million.
Another 2 million,
off we go.
Okay. Whoever's listening here.
Off we go.
Right.
But it does offer significantly better outcomes for trauma. And what's quite interesting is it seems to work. It doesn't really matter what the origin of your trauma is, whether it's childhood sexual abuse, rape, torture, or war trauma, it seems to have to work across all those fields.
So I guess it makes the person realise what it feels like to be feeling good, and then...
No. Interestingly, what it does is it makes the recipient want to take the therapy.
Right.
So when you go into therapy, you can spend years not actually talking about what's happened to you because it's too traumatic to you, or you don't trust the therapist. This, you do it 3 times over a 3-month period, together with therapy in between. And while you're dosing, it makes you empathetic to not only yourself, but also to the therapist. So you want to do the work. You're not afraid of the work. And you can find extraordinary solutions to what seem to you to be completely insurmountable trauma problems. So we hope that the second trial performs as well as the first, and we hope that, the NHS might then adopt it.
Amazing.
We'll see.
Amazing. Well, our journey with you began because of a success story. Let's discuss the success story.
Well, Martin came to us many years ago, having had a very top job in the army. He was the chief lawyer for both sides in Afghanistan, teaching not only soldiers what was okay in a theatre of war, what was legal, but also having to make very complicated and swift decisions on suicide bombers and all sorts of things like that. And eventually, he became traumatized. He started drinking too much. He was then let go from the army. He was medically discharged with PTSD. And then he couldn't really find any help. And eventually he came to us, and then we started supporting him. And he started to find that art was a very good way to help him deal with his trauma. And so he became an artist. So we introduced him to millions of people, you, and who very kindly supported him by buying art, helping him to make a living with that, and using that art to continue to get better. And it's been, very successful. He's had a brilliant mentor who's really opened up a lot of doors to him, but also really supported him through some horrible times. And he is definitely, I'm very pleased to say, on his way.
Brilliant. Well, I won't take credit for that because I passed it all on to Kelling, my friend Emma Detterding at Kelling, who then threw.
Well, you still did a fantastic thing for him.
And
so
it was
you.
a really fun evening, and I think he did really well.
Yeah, he did really well.
A lot of new followers.
Yes, and a lot of new supporters. And yes, I think it was really a great success.
And how much of therapy is in art and exercise? Or do you have to get past that initial block before you can engage in any of the rest of it?
Yeah, there's a lot to get over. And, I remember being with Martin, and I'd taken him to the Chelsea Arts Club. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. And we were sitting in the garden talking to the secretary of the Chelsea Arts Club about how the club might support him as an artist. And a helicopter from Battersea went overhead, and he was underneath the table, shaking like a leaf. And that sort of trauma is so instant. It happens to anybody. It's, that sort of trauma, there's no background. There's no educational background. It doesn't matter if you're a man, if you're a woman. It doesn't matter who you are. It is indiscriminate in who it picks. And once it's got you, so many of those responses are so automatic, and they're completely and totally traumatizing. You are back suddenly in a place that you thought you had left, and it's instant. And so I think that a good thing about art is that it lets your imagination come away from where you've been and go into other areas which are much more healing and not traumatizing. But it also allows you to express feelings which don't have words attached to them. So you're using other ways to express your trauma, which I think is very, very helpful to people. If they've got an artistic bent, not everybody does.
Right. Well, I'm trying to reignite mine, so I'll let you know. But the triggers are really the challenge then, because you just don't know when it's going to hit.
I think the triggers are a great challenge. And I think also it's very easy for what appear to be small things to other people, which are huge things. That, the sense of smell, for example, is a very triggering thing. So you can be walking past something and a smell will send you right back again. Right. That's just part of everyday life, and you have to learn how to deal with that. But it's not an easy task.
Right, so it's actually your senses that are the most affected by these.
I think it's your senses, I think it's your mind, I think your body carries an enormous amount of trauma in the memory, in your cells of your body. And they're complicated, how do how do you retrain all of that?
Gosh.
And how do you leave things behind? We all know how really difficult to leave anything behind.
Yeah.
A grievance, an annoyance. So leaving things behind, really, really hard. And incorporating them into your being and being able to walk on. And I think the same for physical injury. I think, it's a lot to deal with, losing parts of your body, being injured, having to go through hundreds of operations and anaesthetics.
Watching your colleagues.
Exactly. Exactly. Very difficult.
God.
Very, very difficult.
God. And what do we achieve from these wars?
And wars never achieve anything.
Nothing. No. Absolutely nothing. Gosh. No. So let's talk about how can our listeners help? So there's lots of different ways that come to my mind, but, I guess helping as a second nature, what are the type of people that we're trying to get the attention of?
I think everybody wants to help trauma, actually. I think also, if you're going to ask as a country, I think if you're going to ask men and women to go out and effectively do things that you would never dream of training to do yourself, but you want to sleep easy in your bed at night, when those men and women come home, they deserve everybody's support. And I think lots of people talk about their rights and very few people talk about their duties towards each other. I don't mean, but just one human being to another human being. Everybody at some point in their life will need a hand. And you hope that you would be the kind of person who wants to give a hand. So I think supporting the charity as a whole so that we can support lots of Martins and lots of other people. There are lots of ways on our website, supportingwoundedveterans.com, where you can find ways to support us and get in touch. And, money is always the key. You can't do anything, unfortunately, or very little without money. But we have hundreds of volunteers who do hundreds of wonderful things for us. I'm always astonished at the way that people come in and help. So it sort of reinforces your belief in the goodness of mankind and that people are willing to go that extra mile on behalf of somebody else. People like you who just made an introduction. What a huge thing that has turned out to be.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of a few more as we speak. I'll tell you off camera.
Okay.
I have one idea in particular that could be quite handy.
Wonderful.
Well, it's been quite emotional listening to you, actually.
Well, thank you very much.
And, I just hope that these incidences get less and less. Because, as you say...
It doesn't look that way at the moment, does it?
Yeah, no, it looks like the whole world is about to bubble, but yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time to come and see us. And obviously, we'd be delighted to support you in any way that we can. And we'll make sure to get this video out to all the right people. And a big thank you to Kelling for what they did.
Indeed.
And I'm sure that this video will go out to all of their supporters as well. So thank you. And anyone who is listening and who would like to help, tell us the website address.
www.supportingwoundedveterans.com.
There you go.
All one word.
There you go. And keep an eye out for that gap year program. I'll be the first one to sign up. Sad enough for myself, but maybe me too. Thank you, and we'll look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you very much indeed.